Greetings. This is StopFake, a program in which we try to shed a light on the work of Russian propagandists and thus poke a few holes in the Kremlin's nefarious plans. I'm your host, George Sayevich. In recent months, the propaganda resources of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic, DNR, and the Luhansk People's Republic, LNR, and of the Kremlin have increasingly reported on the discovery of graves of local residents killed in 2014-15 and a search for new mass graves. According to these reports, the remains exhumed are those of victims of Ukrainian aggression, or the victims of the armed forces of Ukraine. Serhiy Harmash, a member of the tripartite contact group from Ukraine, recently wrote on Facebook that 6-7 years after the tragic events in the Donbass, quote, the authorities in the occupied territories have begun work with the aim of uncovering mass graves and identifying the human remains therein. That is, they launched a search for missing persons, unquote. In Russia's propaganda war against Ukraine, nothing happens just like that. So, what is the reason in this case? Search activities in the occupied territories intensified this summer when, on July 22, 2021, Russia filed a case against Ukraine in the European Court of Human Rights. Among the claims, quote, war crimes committed by the Ukrainian army and nationalist battalions in the Donbass, unquote. In early November, Luhansk hosted an international roundtable titled The Unhealed Wound of the Donbass, for the purpose of, quote, summarizing the interim results of the search for the burial sites of victims of Ukrainian aggression, unquote. Discussions centered on approximately 10 burial sites and the discovered remains of about 300 persons. It's not known with any degree of certainty who these people were, nor how and when they died. The DNR and LNR authorities, however, have already issued their verdict. According to reports, the moderator, in opening the meeting, claimed that for the 8th year in a row, Ukrainian gunmen have been killing Donbass residents only because they are Russians. The word he used was Ruskiye, which refers to ethnicity. His remarks provide the key to understanding the special operation Russia is conducting under the guise of, quote, searching for dead civilians, unquote, in the areas of the Donbass it occupies. This is not a humanitarian mission. The Kremlin has simply decided to gather arguments in support of its fabrication that the Ukrainian military committed, quote, ethnic cleansing, unquote, that is, genocide in the Donbass. The killing of persons because of their ethnic affiliation falls under this definition and is a violation of the laws and customs of war, while the accidental death of civilians during hostilities does not. The regurgitation of the theme of the, quote, genocide of Donbass residents, unquote, is not something new for Russian propaganda. 7 years ago, in September and October of 2014, Russian media was filled with sensational information about the crimes of Ukrainian forces. In particular, Russian television's First Channel, in its daily newscast, citing DNR investigators, reported on the, quote, mass burial of civilians, unquote, found in an area Ukrainian units had left the day before. The report referred to a grave containing the remains of 4 unidentified persons who had died under unknown circumstances. Nevertheless, the channel found Ukrainian security forces guilty in their death, obviously without any trial. Other propaganda media, including RT English, picked up and disseminated the story. The reaction of the world community to these reports, however, was not what the ideologues of this campaign had expected. On September 30th, 2014, Rossiyskaya Gazeta wrote about how Latvian human rights activist Ainars Graudins and an OSCE group, quote, visited the locations of mass graves in the Donetsk region, where the bodies of more than 400 civilians and executed members of people's militias were found, unquote. A close look at Grauden's statement suggests that his story might be modeled on the report of the OSCE observation mission in Kosovo in January 1999, where the remains of 45 residents of the village of Ratsak were identified as Kosovo Albanians who died at the hands of Serbian security forces. This crime became a turning point in the Bosnian conflict. It was after the details of the tragedy were made public by an OSCE representative that the UN, citing humanitarian reasons, decided to launch an air operation against Yugoslavia. Russia, however, was not able to recreate this course of events in the Donbass in order to get the world community's approval for a, quote, peacekeeping operation against Ukraine, unquote. Its stories about the, quote, crimes of the Ukrainian punishers, unquote, against the peaceful people of the Donbass turned out to be banal fakes. Firstly, it was revealed that Einar's Graudins had nothing to do with the OSCE, and that, in fact, he is a leader of an openly pro-Russian political party in Latvia. His claim about, quote, 400 killed civilians who were found in mass graves in the Donbass, unquote, was refuted even by the militants, who said that they had been misunderstood. The Kremlin responded by raising the topic of Yugoslavia. In 2017 and again in 2019, Vladimir Putin, explaining to the West why Ukraine must not be given back control of its border, attempted to scare the world with the specter of a, quote, new Srebrenica, unquote. According to his logic, if the border is closed, Kyiv will immediately start ethnic cleansing, and Moscow will not be able to intervene to protect the civilians of Donbass, as NATO did in the 1990s to protect Bosniaks from Serb aggression. In July 1995, the town of Srebrenica in Bosnia and Herzegovina was captured by the Bosnian Serb army, which proceeded to murder over 8,000 unarmed Bosnian Muslims. The Srebrenica killings were the largest massacre in Europe since World War II and led directly to a decision to maximize the use of NATO forces to end the war in Bosnia. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia later ruled that the Srebrenica massacre constituted genocide. Today, Russia, by organizing searches for killed civilians in the Donbass, is apparently copying this process in order to present its imitation evidence in an international court, after conducting a propaganda campaign in the world media. And why is the Kremlin putting so much effort into this campaign? It might very well be because Ukraine has intensified its activities in international courts to bring Russia to justice for its aggression in the Donbass and Crimea. As soon as the Kremlin smelled that the fat is in the fire, or more specifically, got a whiff of the Hague tribunal, it began to prepare a response by forming public opinion in the West and gathering evidence for its own acquittal. On November 15, Putin issued another decree on the so-called People's Republics, the DNR and the LNR. Its alleged aim to facilitate the access of goods from these temporarily occupied territories in eastern Ukraine to the Russian market. The decree is packaged officially as humanitarian support. In truth, however, this document is all about, in the words of an official statement from Kyiv, the, quote, further integration of the temporarily occupied Donbass with the Russian economy, unquote. And in order for both Russia and the occupied territories to properly understand the essence of what happened, propaganda was put in play. First, to push a positive message about the recognition of the DNR and the LNR was the chairman of the Kremlin-controlled Crimean Parliament, Vladimir Konstantinov. On November 15, commenting on Putin's decree on his Facebook page, he expounded about the return of the Donbass to Russia. Quote, "From now on, no one will be waiting for an inconceivable signal from the Maidan Nezalezhnosti that an economic revival has begun. Nor will anyone be watching with indifference while the imposters in Kyiv bully the inhabitants of the Donbass. The Russian market is now opening up for them, and what is no less important, they have passed another milestone on the way to realizing their dream of the return of the Donbass to Russia," unquote. Leading Russian propagandist Olga Skabeeva also did not miss the opportunity to tell the world about Putin's decree and hint at the recognition of the DNR and the LNR by Russia. On October 15, on the air of her 60 Minutes program, she stated, quote, "It's a real milestone. Putin signed a very important decree on providing humanitarian support to the population of the DNR and the LNR. Humanitarian aid will be provided until a political settlement in eastern Ukraine is reached. In other words, forever," unquote. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine says it expects Western countries to condemn Putin's new decree. Please recall that Ukraine has constantly emphasized the Kremlin's violation of international law in connection with its so-called, quote, humanitarian convoys, the trucks that, in all likelihood, transport arms and ammunition to Russia's hybrid forces in the Donbass. That's all for today. Do not fall for provocations, show wisdom in online communication, and double-check all information. Read StopFake.org and subscribe to our website. George Sayevich was with you. Thanks, and see you next week.